A simple wedding celebration, a hidden crisis, and a miracle so extraordinary that it became the first public sign of the Messiah's power. The sun rose gently over the hills of Galilee, casting golden light across fields, vineyards, and small villages nestled among the rocky landscape. Life moved quietly in this region of northern Israel. Farmers tended their crops. Fishermen prepared their nets. Merchants opened their stalls. Families began another ordinary day. Yet unknown to most people, history was entering a new chapter. Not long before this moment, Jesus had spent 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness. Alone among the barren hills and scorching desert winds, he had fasted and prayed. There he faced temptation and emerged victorious. The wilderness had tested him, but it had also prepared him. It was a place of silence before a season of action, a place of preparation before revelation. Now he had returned to Galilee. A few disciples had already begun following him. They were ordinary men, fishermen, seekers, men with hopes and questions. They sensed there was something different about Jesus, but they had not yet fully understood who he was. One day, an invitation arrived. A wedding was to take place in Cana, a small village in Galilee. Weddings in those days were unlike most modern ceremonies. They were not brief events lasting only a few hours. They were major community celebrations, often extending over several days. Entire villages participated. Families prepared for weeks, sometimes months. Food was gathered. Decorations were arranged. Musicians were hired. Relatives traveled from surrounding areas. A wedding represented joy, hope, and new beginnings. Jesus accepted the invitation. His mother Mary was also attending. Together with his disciples, he traveled to Cana. As they approached the village, they could already hear signs of celebration. Voices filled the air. Music drifted through the streets. Children ran excitedly among groups of guests. The wedding feast had begun. People wore their finest garments. Friends greeted one another warmly. Families exchanged blessings and laughter. Tables were filled with food. Servants moved constantly, ensuring that every guest was cared for. The atmosphere was one of happiness. No one suspected that before the celebration ended, they would witness a miracle remembered for thousands of years. As the feast continued, guests enjoyed the food and conversation. Musicians played cheerful melodies. Stories were shared. Blessings were spoken over the newly married couple. Everything appeared perfect. But behind the scenes, trouble was growing. The family's supply of wine was running out. At first, perhaps only a few servants noticed. They may have whispered among themselves while checking containers and storage areas. Soon the reality became impossible to ignore. There was not enough wine left for the remainder of the celebration. Panic began spreading among those responsible. Running out of wine was no small matter. In Jewish culture, hospitality was considered sacred. Providing generously for guests reflected honor and respect. Failing to do so could bring shame not only to the bridegroom, but also to the entire family. Years later, people might still remember. That was the wedding where they ran out of wine. The thought alone would have filled the hosts with dread. As concerns spread among the servants, Mary became aware of the situation. Perhaps she overheard worried conversations. Perhaps a family member quietly approached her. Whatever the circumstance, she recognized the seriousness of the problem. She looked toward Jesus. Among all those present, he alone possessed the power to completely change the situation. Walking to him, she spoke only a few words. They have no wine. Nothing more. No demand. No explanation. Just a simple statement of need. Yet within those words was profound trust. Mary had known Jesus longer than anyone else present. She remembered the angel's announcement before his birth. She remembered shepherds arriving with stories of heavenly messengers. She remembered wise men traveling from distant lands. She remembered prophecies spoken over him as a child. She remembered years of watching him grow in wisdom and character. Although he had not yet publicly revealed his miraculous power, she trusted him completely. Jesus answered thoughtfully, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His response indicated that every step of his mission would unfold according to God's perfect timing. Yet Mary remained calm. She showed no disappointment. Instead, she turned toward the servants. Then she spoke words that would echo through history. "Whatever he tells you, do it." The servants may not have understood her confidence. They may not have known exactly who Jesus was. But they listened. Nearby stood 6 large stone jars. These were not ordinary household containers. They were used for ceremonial washing according to Jewish purification customs. Each jar held a large amount of water. Together, they represented a tremendous capacity. Jesus looked at the servants. Then he gave his first instruction: fill the jars with water. The command must have seemed strange. The problem was wine, not water. How could filling jars with water possibly solve the crisis? Yet the servants obeyed. Bucket after bucket, they carried water. Again and again they walked back and forth. The work was not easy. The jars were large. Filling them required effort. Still they continued. Eventually, every jar stood completely full. Not partially filled. Not almost full. Filled to the brim. Nothing more could be added. The servants stepped back. They had done exactly as Jesus instructed. Then Jesus gave another command. Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. At this moment the servants faced a choice. The jars had been filled with water. The master expected wine. Taking water to him could result in embarrassment or punishment. Yet once again they obeyed. One servant dipped into a jar. He filled a serving vessel. Whatever happened, he carried the contents toward the banquet master. The master accepted the drink. He raised it to his lips. Then he tasted it. What happened next surprised him completely. The liquid was not water. It was wine. And not merely wine. Exceptional wine. The quality exceeded expectations. The master immediately called for the bridegroom. With genuine astonishment he said, "Everyone serves the best wine first. Then, after guests have had plenty to drink, the cheaper wine is served. But you have saved the best until now." The bridegroom likely looked confused. He had done no such thing. He knew nothing about the miracle. The master did not know. The guests did not know. Most people at the wedding remained completely unaware of what had happened. But the servants knew. They had filled the jars with water. They had carried the transformed drink. They knew something impossible had occurred. The disciples also knew. Standing nearby, they witnessed the outcome. For them, this moment changed everything. Until now, they had followed Jesus largely through faith and curiosity. Now they saw evidence. Creation itself had responded to his authority. Water had become wine. Nature had obeyed its creator. The miracle revealed something profound about Jesus. He possessed power beyond human ability. This was not a trick, not an illusion, not clever deception. It was divine authority displayed through a simple act. Yet the miracle revealed more than power. It revealed compassion. Jesus cared about people. He cared about their needs. He cared about their joy. He cared about their dignity. Some might imagine that divine power should be reserved only for grand events involving kings, armies, or nations. But Jesus chose a wedding, a family celebration, a community gathering, a place where ordinary people faced an ordinary problem. The message was clear. God cares about everyday life. No concern is too small for him. No need is beneath his attention. The miracle also demonstrated abundance. Jesus did not merely provide enough wine to avoid embarrassment. He provided more than enough. Where human resources had failed, divine provision overflowed. Fear became peace. Loss became restoration. The wedding celebration continued. Music played. Guests laughed. Conversations resumed. Joy filled the gathering once again. Most people celebrated without realizing they were drinking wine created through a miracle. Yet hidden beneath the surface was a revelation of enormous significance. The first public sign of Jesus had occurred. This miracle revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Their faith deepened. Questions began finding answers. They were witnessing something extraordinary. The promised Messiah was standing among them. Years later, the disciples would remember that day vividly. They would remember the worried servants. They would remember Mary's faith. They would remember the heavy stone jars. They would remember the command to fill them. They would remember the Master's astonishment. Most importantly, they would remember Jesus, the one who quietly entered a wedding feast, the one who noticed a hidden need, the one who transformed water into wine, the one who revealed his glory not through spectacle, but through compassion. And as the celebration in Cana continued beneath the Galilean sky, few realized that history had changed. The first public miracle had been performed. The ministry of Jesus had begun, and the world would never be the same.